I think what is unusual is that in 2004, President Bush in his inaugural address, second inaugural address, decided to state that it was in fact our national interest now to turn that on its head and put democracy at the centerpiece of our foreign policy, that promoting democracy itself was in our national interest. And we've never really made promoting democracy one of the centerpieces of our foreign policy. Bush, I think, did that for about a year, and then realized that wasn't quite such a great idea. I think some of the things that soured him on that was the consequences in Egypt when the Muslim Brotherhood did very well in the elections there, and the consequences in Palestine when Hamas won the election, even though they only won about 35% of the vote, but for a variety of electoral reasons they ended up winning that election. And then in Lebanon, of course, when it came down to either supporting Israeli airstrikes or supporting the Lebanese government, which was a fragile democracy, we decided to support Israel's airstrikes last summer. And so it turns out that this policy of supporting democracy was short-lived on Bush's part, and I think we have returned to our realpolitik approach, which is what's guided American foreign policy for most part of history.
I agree with the premise of the semantically, but I think it's good foreign policy to support your friends and undermine your enemies. This question is a good one because conservatives have had the longest problem with supporting and having a long-term relationship with Saudi Arabia. It's a despotic, ancient monarchy that has an incestuously evil relationship with the Wahhabi fanaticism. It's a city that finances a good deal of the terrorism throughout the world, particularly the Wahhabi-funded mosques, which makes up to 70% of the United States. Some of you, or maybe we all know, that the Wahhabis are the most virulent form of extreme Islam that is xenophobic, hateful, viciously anti-Semitic, viciously anti-Western, anti-American. And so, you know, with friends like that, who needs enemies? We know that the vast majority of the terrorists in the 9/11 attack were from Saudi Arabia. We know that a lot of them were thrown up in Iraq as suicide. So it's a serious issue, and I don't know if they can be considered a friend. Pragmatically, it's probably better having the royal family running the show than Bin Laden's brother-in-law running the show. But it's something that we need to distance ourselves. Part of that has to do with the necessity of depending upon the oil. You know, we have so much oil in the United States and the continental shelf and Alaska, but our Democrat friends don't want exporting it. They would rather have to be more dependent on Iranian oil or on the bicycle. There's no moderate ground for them. I'll disagree with Dr. Ali. Our nation's gone through historical fits back and forth in supporting and advancing democracy throughout the world, going back to the Manifest Destiny and President Wilson was the last great architect of promoting democracy throughout the world, and we oftentimes regret it. We try to promote democracy, try to get other nations and civilizations and countries up to our level of participatory democracy, and oftentimes it fails. And I think it's probably with President Bush, probably his most noble legacy is going to be that this is a goal that he sought. Not generally successful, of course, but at least it's an important goal. It's far better than the Kissinger-Nixon approach of being extremely cynical and diabolic and working with the worst of the worst. And so I think it's a good idea to avoid those countries that are dictatorial. I think it's a good idea when Condoleezza Rice waves her finger at the Egyptians for the lack of democracy. On the other hand, we have to understand that pure democracy can also elect pure evil. We saw that with Hitler in Germany, and that's not a good. And Hamas, although they did not get a majority, they're an extremely violent terrorist organization, extremely oppressive in Gaza, to the extent that they're the only organization in the world that can make fatah look good and reasonable and moderate. So we would like to see democracy, but perhaps we should now call it enlightened democracy.
You need to know that the Arabic dictionary has no room for the word democracy. The concept of democracy is not known by the Arabs and has never been mentioned in the Islamic teachings. In addition to that, you need to know that 65% at least of the Muslim population is illiterate. They have never learned about their freedom and their human rights. I am not a politician, and I don't know the political agenda behind the war in Iraq. But if this war was conducted to apply democracy, then I have to say it was a big mistake. The war should be fought at first at the ideological front. They have never heard of the concept of democracy. We might need arms and tanks to protect the already applied democracy, but we cannot by force apply democracy before teaching people about their freedom and their human rights. In the world of ideals, this war in Iraq could be a very good opportunity to reestablish the Middle East. But what's going on in Iraq and everywhere else reconfirms my argument that Islam is the root cause of the problem.
The next question, number 2, we'll start at this time with Sean Steele. Many Muslims point to the agreement that Muhammad made the Jews of his community, the Compact in Medina, as an example of democracy and religious freedom. Yet, it would appear that this document does not always give full equality to everyone associated with the Muslims. For example, verse 16 reads, quote, "Those Jews who follow the believers will be helped and be treated with equality," end quote. But verse 13 reads, quote, "No believer will help an unbeliever against a believer," end quote. Does Islam regard non-Muslims, even allies, as a second-class citizen? Does this imply that within an Islamic state, one's religious affiliations matter more than justice? Mr. Steele, I would like to reverse the order that. I know we went first with Dr. Ali, but I would please go from Dr. Ali answer the question first. Dr. you still all right with that, sir?
Whatever you want to do.
Oh, that's cool. Right.
Okay, well, the problem with, I think, with a question like this for an audience like yourself is you have no idea what the Compact of Medina is, if you're not familiar with the document, and you're certainly not familiar with the historical circumstances in which the document was created. So let me just briefly create some background for it. This is after Muhammad has left Mecca and gone to Medina, which is a city about 100 miles to the north. In Mecca, he was the leader of a small group of Muslims, had been there for about 10 years preaching, and had been persecuted the whole time. The Meccans had tried to kill him. The people in Medina consisted of a variety of groups. They were fighting among themselves, and they invited Muhammad to come to try to bring peace to the community there. And some portion of the people in Medina were willing to become Muslims. Not all of them, in fact, only a minority. So when he comes to Medina, they create this document called the Compact of Medina, which is meant to be a document that is going to create the framework under which the community is going to live, a constitution, if you will, if you use a term like that for this. In the book that I wrote on human rights in Islam, we have a chapter on constitutionalism. I wrote it with several other people. And we actually looked at the Compact in Medina in detail and analyzed it in detail. The Compact basically is a document dealing with issues of security for the community and creating a set of mutual obligations between all members of the community, both the Jews, the Muslims, and what were called the pagans or the non-believers, people who were basically the idol worshippers, which was the common religion of the Arabs at the time. And I would say that you have to read the whole thing in detail to try to make heads or tails of it, but I would add a couple other quotes to this to give context. Number 15, the security of God is one, the granting of neighborly protection by the least of them, the believers, is binding on all of them. The believers are patrons of one another to the exclusion of other people. Then the next verse says, whoever of the Jews follows us has the same help and support as the believers, so as long as they are not wronged by him and he does not help others against them. The word help, to help each other, is help in the context of a war. You are not going to help others fight this community. You are going to stay allied to each other. You are all bound together in one community for military defense. And that's what this document is about. It's basically a security document.